Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Connected Wellness Podcast. I am Rachel Ann. I'm here with the lovely Marianne, and we are so passionate about wellness.
Here in this podcast, we look at the ways our physical, emotional, and spiritual health is all connected and how we can take better care of our whole selves holistically so we can live our best lives. We're really excited that you're here with us on the journey. Welcome to
Yay!
episode 43 of the podcast.
Yes, 43. We are here.
We are here and we are so thankful that you're tuning in. We're happy to have you. Um,
Yes.
we have a great topic today, and it's just hilarious timing, as you will see. We decided to talk about like lack of control today, right?
hmm
Like things that we can't control and how do we deal with that? Um, and Rachel Ann, why is this hilarious timing that we're going to talk about control today?
I'm able to laugh. I think Marianne is still processing her feelings and may be able to laugh very soon.
Maybe when we
Um,
finish this recording, I will laugh
perhaps
about it. We will see.
that's
Yes, because
that's legit.
I'm looking at the clock. It's been almost an hour, right,
Dang.
of
Oh,
attempting to establish a good enough connection to record. And this is
yeah.
take two this week, right? Our second
Yeah.
attempt at recording this episode. The
Yeah.
technology is just not cooperating.
Nope.
Why, after 43 episodes, we cannot figure out that it just doesn't want to work. There's something to unpack. There's a lot of things to unpack
Yeah.
here. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yes. So we're just going to keep praying that
Yep.
that this allows us to continue recording to finish this episode, which is much needed. Yes.
Yeah. That is why it is funny, y'all, because God is like, this is a reminder that you have no control. The number of technologies that we have gone through and different recording mediums.
And configurations.
Yep.
And yeah, it's like wild. It's
Yep.
just for two very impatient people. And I think that my biggest impatience is with technology. Like I just
Mm.
have no like when something doesn't work, I'm done. Like I'm just
Yeah.
done with it and I want to just like walk away. But I love this podcast and I do not want to walk away from this podcast.
Yes.
So I don't know what is going on, but we will figure it out. Um, we'll figure it out. But for now, I
Yes.
think we're here. I think
Yeah. That's your
I think
wellness
we're
win.
here and
You
it's
did it.
working out. Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't
Oh,
just
not
throw it
throwing
all
in the
away.
towel.
Yep. Yep. You
I like
probably
it.
wanted to many times.
But that's how strongly I feel about this podcast, that
Wow.
I do not want to abandon it. I think it is wonderful and valuable, and I would like to keep making it if God will allow it. And the
Yeah.
technology, if He will make the technology cooperate, that would be fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. You're taking votes, God. That's our vote. Allow
Yeah.
the tech to work.
Okay, but speaking of wellness wins, do you
Yes.
have one that you want to share?
Yes. So you may notice a few different things about this podcast episode. Yes, we're on Zoom. Yes, we are both wearing green, which is so exciting. And I'm in a different location because I moved.
Yay.
Yes, huge big yay. If you are somebody who lives in New York City, then you know that moving is probably one of the literally the most stressful things on planet Earth. I'm not going to go into all the details why, because we were at the finish line and we praise the Lord for that. But it was very stressful. And then it was also very smooth at different times. But we are loving our new apartment, loving our new neighborhood. So I'm just so excited. So the wellness win is that we survived
Yeah.
moving in New York City. And not only that, so we moved, y'all, we moved on a Wednesday, and then not everything fit in the U-Haul. And so we had to make a few more trips. And by we, I mean my husband. God bless him. He made a few more trips to bring over the rest of the stuff. Then on the next Sunday, we flew for a week for a vacation for my husband's birthday, which is awesome. Awesome, 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 but slightly stressful because we are leaving to go on vacation when some things are still in boxes. We're not,
Hmm.
we're still organizing things. So it's a little bit stressful, but we came back feeling refreshed and ready to continue to unpack and organize. And so far, That has been the case. And the Lord is teaching me patience in so many ways, besides the technology of this podcast, also in the form of these many boxes that you see behind me that hopefully will be gone the next time you see my face.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's where we are. That's the wellness one.
Well, congratulations. And I mean, I know the timing is weird, and was maybe felt suboptimal, but you probably really needed that break,
We
after
did.
all that time you guys spent searching and
Yeah.
waiting, to hear back. And that was like quite an ordeal. And then the packing and the
Yeah.
moving itself, like a vacation sounds like really necessary at that point.
It was. It was. I definitely don't regret it. I definitely like if we were planning like this again, I would still be like, yeah, we're going to go on this vacation. We are not going to
Nice.
say no to this. So I'm really glad that we did that. So thanks, girl. Do you want to use the podcast as your wellness win, or do you have another wellness one to share?
Yeah, let's just use that for today. I can share what
Beautiful.
I had thought of before. So, yes, I have not broken my technology and walked away. Um, After, again, just so everyone is aware, this is the second time we've tried to
Mm-hmm.
record episode 43. We tried a few days ago, nothing was working. We were like, okay, I had to go to work. I'm sure you had stuff, and we were like, we can't just keep trying forever.
Yep.
We rescheduled for today, and it took almost an hour to feel like we can actually start this recording.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, and so within that, by the way, when we say we're trying things out, the first time a few days ago, we tried different technologies, different computers, all of the things. So it's not like we just sat there and we're like, okay, it doesn't work. No. And then again, we did that today. So
Hmm.
this is probably the seventh time I've pushed record. Past two
For
days
this one
for
episode.
this
Yeah,
one
yeah,
episode about
yeah,
control.
yeah.
L to
And
the O to the
today
L.
we have a in-house tech support here. Chris is home today, so
Praise the Lord.
if he wasn't here, I don't know, I probably maybe would have thrown in the towel because
Yeah.
there's only so many things that I can come up with for options here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just use this here. Okay, so control, right? Like we have been doing this for a long time. We record the exact same way, the exact same setup, the exact same devices. It's
Yeah.
been wonderful. Very few hiccups along the way, but everything's been great.
Yeah.
So our behavior is the same, right? But the outcome has been very different. And
Mhm.
that's where we have no control. And I feel like that happens so much in our life. And
Mhm.
that's the extremely frustrating part is that your behavior, you feel like you do all the right things, right? Like I took all of the necessary steps to get to this certain outcome that I would like to get to. Um, but the outcome is not as I want it to be.
Mhm.
Something has blown up in my face or whatever, and it feels that no matter what I do, I cannot impact the outcome in the way that I want to, right? This
Mhm.
feeling of
Mhm.
lack of control.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I don't know, there's so many things to be said about this because it should be obvious that we don't have control over things. Like we are not
Yeah.
that powerful, right, to be able to control technology or anything for that matter, getting a job, getting an apartment, right? The status of my relationship. I can't control these things, but yet why is it still so frustrating then? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is very frustrating. One, as human beings, we want to think that we have like the power to do absolutely everything and we don't need to rely on anybody. We don't need support or anything. And so that makes us feel like we are able to control everything and that makes us feel better. So if I can control everything, that means that any difficult situation that I encounter, any hardship, I will be able to figure it out and deal with it. So I will have a carefree life with no hardships. That's like the
Hmm.
underlying thing. And I think another part of it too, for those of us like Marin and I, we both live in the United States. United States of America is a rather individualistic culture, which means that there is a lot more emphasis on individualism than there is on like community collectivistic support. And so that also reinforces the idea that you yourself have to be in control of every aspect of your life. And if that aspect of your life, such as the technology of your podcast, is not working the way you want it to, then that means that you suck as a person. And that is really intense. But for people who have this desire to control everything, and for people who live in cultures and societies that say individualism is how you get the most praise, then it can lead to us believing that, well, we must control everything so that we will continue to be honored and we will get the things that we want so we can avoid hardship. So that's like the underlying thing. It's great
Hmm.
that we don't want to experience hardships, but at the end of the day, we will experience them, and there may be some that are out of our control. And so learning, especially as Christians, to trust in the Lord with those things is very, very difficult, but
Hmm.
that's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you mentioned the culture, I think it's very much like if you just pick up your bootstraps, forgive the dated
Mm,
reference, but like if you just like hustle hard enough, if you work hard enough, like we all love those stories of like rags to riches, right? Like because
mm,
this person, took all these steps and they had determination and grit and perseverance and whatever, like look where they are now. That
mm,
makes us think that we can do the same thing, which I'm not saying we can't, but again,
right,
there are often things that are out of our control, right? That we
right.
just cannot, no matter how hard I work, I cannot, ensure that I have this amazing outcome. Yeah.
Yes, and here, sorry, I'm playing with my little like rubber band fidget thing. Um, tiny not rebuttal, tiny thing about that. The rags to riches stories and the like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What people don't actually realize about those stories and those situations is that there usually is a part of the story where they receive support from somebody else. Like it's usually, I'm not saying that they're not working hard. They
Hmm.
absolutely are. And it shows that we actually need support and to be around other people, and we need to rely on God, because in those situations, what usually ends up happening is somebody in their community is like, oh, absolutely, I'll give you $5 because I believe in your dream. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or there's like a person who's like nice and they're like, oh, cool. Like, I see that you really want to learn about computers. Come to my free like computer workshop. So they're still working really hard. We're not taking that away from them, but there is usually parts of the story where we realize that, oh, this was not 100% on you. And it couldn't be. Like that is a really big what's the word? That's a really big ask for you to be 100% in control of absolutely everything in your life. Like
Hmm.
that's a really big unfair ask to put on
Sure.
somebody. So that's my like tiny little caveat to keep in mind when we do hear those stories.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Definitely. Okay. So if we agree that we are not in control of most
Mhm.
things, maybe in a little bit we can say, what am I actually in control of? Because there are things that I can control that are going to have an important impact. But I know the answer is duh. Who is in control? And what does it mean?
Uh,
That's really what I want to talk about. So, what does it
yeah.
mean that he is in control? Because this can be so um, misconstrued and rub
Yeah.
people the wrong way. Like, what do you mean? So, I'm just a puppet, like nothing that
Yeah.
I, want
Yeah.
or nothing that I do actually matters. If God has this whole plan mapped out and he's just kind of like
Yeah.
moving me like a chess piece or whatever. So, what does it mean that he is in control, and how do we reconcile that with our free will that we know
Mm,
God has given us, right?
mm, mm. Who, okay, I did not go to seminary. We really need to invite my husband on the podcast, which I've been saying, but this is a time where I'm like,
Anytime, Rachel, I'm ready. Anytime to have him. Yes.
I keep saying to myself, I wonder what my husband would say about this because he probably would have some like great theological deep dive. So that's like another caveat. We are non-seminarians, but we still have really great ideas. What comes to my mind is a few things. One, yes, the Lord has given us free will, which basically means that we have the desires and the ability to make choices. And sometimes those choices are in alignment with the Lord. Sometimes those choices are not in alignment with God. And because God is so gracious and loving, and because he so badly desires a relationship with us, that when we make a choice that's outside of his will for us, he will do things to redirect it, right? So in Romans 8, it talks about, is much beautifully said than how I'm going to say it now, but basically there is no wasted time, no wasted season for people who have put their faith in Christ, because he will turn everything for his good, for the good of God. So what that means is that I can make a misstep and he's like, I love you so much. And I so badly want people to know that I love them and that I'm there for them, that in this mistake that you have made, I am going to turn it around so that you will be good. But more than that, so that I will be glorified, so that people will see, wow, Rachel made this misstep, but it actually ended up being part of a greater plan that worked out really well. This must mean that there is a God who I can
Hmm.
trust, right? That's the idea behind it. I think that's one thing. And I think another thing when it comes to control is God has control, but he's not controlling. He's not possessive. He's not narcissistic. Yes, a lot of our lives should revolve around him because he's the creator of the universe, not because he's insecure, not because he's harmful or filled with anger and has no love, right? So God has control, but he is not going to say, okay, you are a robot and you're going to do everything that I say and want you to do.
Hmm.
It is because he wants a relationship with us that he gives us hearts and desires and choice, so that we choose him, we choose his way, things of that nature. Um, so that's what immediately comes to my mind. I'm sure there's probably a deeper dive, though, that a seminarian named Brandon can take us down. But
Yeah,
what
well,
do you
you
think?
could always, interview him a little snippet and we could share it with this episode if he has anything that he really wants to share about that. But
Mhm.
I like what you said about this redirection, right?
Mm,
So, God has this plan, and if I'm going off the rails, he will redirect me. But here's the deal. This is where my free will comes into play. I can see this redirection and reject it,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
God could be nudging me a certain direction and I could be like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do my own thing. So even though he has the ability to nudge and direct and, get us to the end goal that he has for us, which is our salvation, I have the ability to reject that. So I still
yeah.
always will have that free will. I think that's important to note,
Mm,
that that's like the balance, that he has
mm,
the power, the ability, the knowledge, right? That I love this idea that God does not exist in time, like he is outside of time. And,
yeah,
he sees my entire life from conception, to the afterlife, like it's all laid out there,
yeah,
so he
yeah,
sees everything. So he can, yes, do all this great redirecting if I'm open to it, right? If I
yes.
allow him to work in my life. But that again reminds me back to this silly example of what's happened today. So if things go outside of our plan, right, or
Mhm.
things like this happen, is that always a redirection? Is that always a message from God? Because
Mm,
I tend to do this, and Chris and I talk about this all the time, that if something goes wrong, if something bad happens, I'm like, well, what is God trying to tell me here? Like,
mm,
what is he trying? What is the lesson he wants me to get out of this? Like, what does he want me to do differently? And Chris is of the belief that not everything is a lesson. Like, sometimes stuff
mhm,
happens. Like, maybe my computer is just old, right?
mhm,
Like that's the reason this isn't working. It's just old. Maybe I abused it too much over the years and it's just like dying. And that's,
yeah,
that God doesn't really have anything to do with that. But in my head, I'm like, okay, something he wants me to change something. Like, what is it
mm,
that he wants me to change? What is it that he wants me to learn? Um, Quite a bit about patience and letting go of control. I know that that's always a lesson I need to learn. But what do you think? I'm curious,
mm,
is there always something he's trying to tell us with, something that goes wrong, with something that seems out of my
mm.
control?
I'm in alignment with Chris's belief about it, but I will say this. I think that everything does have like a lesson that God wants to teach us, but who the lesson is for may be different.
Mm,
So let's say for this technology example, maybe the lesson is like, yes, Marianne, you need to upgrade your technology every few years. Yes, like, let's be nice to the laptop. maybe you should get a MacBook. I just had to slide that in there. I'm pro Mac, she's pro Android and not Mac, and it's fine. We still love each other
Yeah.
and our friends.
Yeah.
Um, and so potentially, yes, that is like there's a deeper meaning to it, right? And I think it's worthy of exploration. Like, what's my relationship to technology? What makes it difficult for me to get a new laptop before one completely breaks, right? I don't know. That's a fun deep dive. I think another side of it too is if the lesson is not for you, but maybe it's for somebody else who's involved in the situation, maybe this is a lesson for the Wi-Fi company where they're like, oh, actually, there's like a bug and we don't know that there's a bug. So because this thing is happening to Marianne and Marianne will let us know, I'm not saying you're going
Hmm.
to do you, girl, but let's say Marianne wants to let us know about it, then that's how we know there's an issue. And so that's how we are corrected, right? So,
Hmm.
um, I forgot where I was when I heard this, and I may have said this on the podcast before, but it really stuck with me, and I'm feeling it applicable to this situation as well, which is as people, when we experience some type of hardship, some type of disruption in a friendship, in a relationship, in work, in technology, whatever it is, it's either a response from our sin and our dysfunction that we are causing, or we're on the receiving end of somebody else's sin and dysfunction. And so that's what I feel like is at play here. It's like, okay, the lesson, God, is this a lesson that you want for me? Is there something I should be doing differently? Or am I on the receiving end of somebody else's dysfunction? There probably is a lesson still for me, which is how do
Yeah.
I cope with that? How do I like let go of control when somebody's doing something that's mean to me and I can't change their actions, right? Whatever it is. So that's my deep dive answer to that. I'm still wondering about it though.
Yeah, well, I heard this somewhere. I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but those who look for God's hand in everything will see God's hand in everything.
Mm,
So
that's true.
again, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the idea is that like God knows my heart, right? So if
Yeah.
he knows that I'm constantly on the lookout for him to talk to me, to guide me, to help me, and I feel like we need to be creative in how we hear from God because he doesn't text me, he doesn't call me, he's not just like, "Hey, Marianne, do this and everything will be fine." As much as I would love for that to happen, that's not how it works. So he
Mm,
knows that I'm constantly on the lookout for him. So if
mhm.
I'm looking, he's so nice. He's so nice
Mm,
and he's going to give me what I'm looking for. So maybe if he knows that every time something goes wrong, I'm like, "Hey, God, what is it?" Then he
yeah.
will turn it into a lesson. So perhaps that,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the intention. Again, maybe the laptop just sucks and that is what it is. Don't buy whatever this is the lesson. I don't even know what it is because I have an in-house tech support that I don't even think about the technology. Maybe that's the lesson. I need to be more independent with technology. Yeah, sorry, side note. But God knows that I'm
Ah.
looking, right?
Mm,
So he will give me the lesson that he thinks I need in that moment. Um,
mm,
so I feel confident about that. I don't feel that theologically there's anything wrong with me being like, okay, something went wrong, even if it's small, I'm listening, God, right?
mhm,
Because,
mhm.
God gives his children what they ask for, right? Ask and you will receive. He knows how to
Yeah.
give us good things. And if he knows I'm waiting for his guidance, why wouldn't he give it to me?
Yeah. I think, hmm. Wow, you said so many amazing things. I think that God is everywhere. If we look for God's hand, we will find it. Now, does that necessarily mean there's a lesson? I don't know. But I do also think what you just said is basically something that you're experiencing a hardship, and the first response is, God, what do you want me to get out of this? The answer may be, nah, girl, just like sit here. This is a tricky situation. I'm sorry, it sucks. It could be, I want you to learn, your relationship with technology. I want you to learn patience. I want you to learn blah, 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 whatever it is. We don't know until we ask him and we seek him. And yes, the Bible says, ask and you shall receive. But if we ask for something that is sinful or outside of
Hmm.
the line, like what God wants, he's not going to give it to us. And
Yeah.
really, the desires of our heart at the end of the day, as sinful humans, the real desire that we have in our heart as human beings is to be in alignment with God. is to be like with him. That's the truest, like deepest desire that we have as Christians, beyond any relationships, any material things, any yummy food. It is the deepest desire that we have is for closeness with God. So all of the lessons that God has for us is so that we continue to be in holiness, so that we can, I just spit, sorry, so that we can be in relationship with him.
Yeah.
That's the goal of it. So I don't know. I think you just modeled it really well. When we experience something, the first question is, God, what is it that you want me to be learning from this situation?
I mean, sometimes it might just be to sit with him, like you said, like there's
Be
nothing, this
still.
sucks. Yeah, just so, I think again, if the action is to turn to him, he's happy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that's what he wants all the time, like you said. And when you said he will give us only what is good for us.
Mm,
So seeking him is always good for me.
mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
even if the answer is again, just seek me, turn to me, pay attention to me, communicate with me. I think that's always a good outcome from these things that happen that seem to be out of our control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Interesting conversation. That is so funny because we wouldn't have had most of this conversation had this not happened. So again,
Yeah.
like yeah, our conversation about control probably would have went a very different way, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But okay, so what I really want to make sure we touch on is what do we have control over? Because it could feel
Mm-hmm.
very disheartening if we're like, well, I can't control anything. I'm just floating in space and stuff happens
Yeah.
and I have to deal with it, right? So what do we have control over?
Yeah, I think that is different for each person. But I think the question to be thinking about to help you figure out what you actually have control over, um, is thinking about your life and your decisions. And it's like, oh, well, when I do this, what happens? Am I able to actually control the outcome? So, for example, for some people, they have more control over their physical health. They don't have many physical health issues. So, when they eat vegetables, great things happen. Other people, like me, what I've shared that has a few diagnoses, it doesn't matter what I do. My body is like, no, I still do what I want to do, sis. And I'm like, oh, dang. Well, that's when I have to like pull in some medication or pull in some lifestyle adjustments. And hopefully it decides that it wants to listen to this, right? So each person is different. And the question is, well, when I do something, do I get the outcome that I want? Am I able to, I don't mean manipulate in like a gross term. I mean manipulate in the purest definition of it. It's very, very clinical, I'm realizing. Um, but am I able to manipulate situations to get the desired outcome? If you are, then yes, you probably have more control in that situation than not. If you're not, then you probably don't. So it's like groceries. You probably have control over the groceries that you buy if you are somebody that goes to the grocery store. If you're somebody who doesn't go to the grocery store, then you may have to ask somebody, like, hey, can you go to the grocery store for me? So you still have some control, but not as much because you were not physically going to the grocery store and
Hmm.
doing all of these things. I don't know why that's the one that I thought of, but
Well,
that's like
yeah,
a very minute example.
and it's giving me a counter to that is what I'm thinking of because okay, this has happened to me more times than I would really care to have happened, is that I have all of the best intentions of healthy groceries and whatever, and I buy salads, right? How many times have I brought home a salad and there's a bug in the salad? More times than
Mm.
I like more times
Oh
than I feel is
gosh.
acceptable. So this is what I'm
Oh,
saying, that we think we have control over certain things, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make this great salad for dinner and I bring home my groceries, I open the salad, there's a bug. Y'all know me, there's no chance I can throw that lettuce away. No, that entire
yeah, the whole
thing is
thing is
going in
done.
the tray. Yeah, there's no chance I'm going to eat that salad. Right.
Hmm.
So there goes my sense of control. Or,
Hmm.
something is recalled, right? So I
Yeah.
can't eat this particular thing. So I know these are very specific examples, but I feel like most of the time, these external things that we think we have control over, we really don't, right? Like we
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the nature of our world. So I'm going to
Hmm.
counter with the only thing that I have control over is my reaction to
Hmm.
things, right? So how do I react when I open that salad bag and there's a freaking bug?
Mm.
Like I can't tell. That's funny that you mentioned that because now that's all I can think of, and
It's the sound.
how angry that makes me. But listen, that's the
Yeah.
problem, right? So this thing has happened that I have no control over, right? Where that salad came from and the way that it was, packaged and processed and whatever, right? And I get it. And then the fact that it would like ruin my evening, that was under my control.
Mm.
And why did I let it
That's a
ruin
good
my
point.
evening? Right? And why did I let it be like, okay, screw this, I'm not eating vegetables anymore, or whatever it is, right? So, like, it sounds so silly, but that's really going to affect the quality of my life, how I
Yeah.
react to
Yeah.
things that don't go as planned, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I said, forget this, I quit the podcast because I can't deal with these technology issues, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge impact based on how I react to the situation. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I think that that's really, when you break it down, the only thing we can control.
That was a great counter. And I have a little caveat and apparently a new fidget toy that's a cute little teddy bear. A new caveat to that, what you just said, the counter, which is some could argue that if your response is what you are stating you have complete control over, if your response is not at the level that the situation is calling for, so what you have described is like anger about the salad, Marianne's anger about the salad, right? It's disproportionate. Some would argue that if and when those things happen, there are other things happening that is influencing slash impacting your ability to regulate your emotion in that time.
Sure.
I don't think
Yeah.
it means you have less control, but I think what it does say is there are things that are influencing the way that you show up in that, and that if you had less influence from other things, then maybe you would show up in a more authentic way to that. Maybe the way you want to authentically show up to that salad is proportionate. But because of influences of, I don't know if you have a history with bugs or with salad or control or with that grocery store, I don't know
All
what
of
it
the
is.
above. Yeah.
Or, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, because of that, you are not expressing your emotions in the way that you authentically would want to. So, I feel like it's both of those. I don't know what that dance was, but that was me
I'm
trying to
just
express.
still really enjoying the expression authentically show up for that salad. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but now it's my
Yeah.
goal to authentically show up for every salad.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yes.
Again, if anyone knows what that means, let me know because I'm not sure I know what that means, but I like it. Like
Like authentically
I know what
show.
you mean.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like for the salad part is what kind of just like,
For the salad. The
yeah,
salad deserves your authenticity, Marianne.
not with the bug in it, man. Not with the bug in it. But yeah. Okay.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we're mostly agreeing, I think, but you're saying that there are other factors that could technically be out of my control, right? How my work day went, for example, things like that that go into how I'm able to respond, like you said, regulate emotions, respond appropriately to a given circumstance. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm.
I would agree with that. Okay. So do you think some of us have more of a problem with desiring control than others?
You tell me, Marianne. Just yes.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. Why do you think that is? I have a suspicion, but why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So, from a psychological perspective, there's a lot of diagnoses where really it's about control, right? So, for example, somebody who deals with disordered eating, it's usually about
Hmm.
control. Maybe about self-image a little bit, but it's usually there's some type of like control and history of trauma that goes with it. So I think there's that aspect. If you're somebody who has lived a really difficult life where maybe lots of potentially traumatic things have happened to you and you had no control or say in those situations, and then as an adult, you may have a really strong desire for control, and that may show up in a way that's unhealthy. That's
Yeah.
definitely like a thing. If you are somebody who has a low tolerance for anxiety or a low tolerance for disruptions in your routine, then you may have a high desire for control. So I think it's just partly it's human nature, and then I think it's other parts of it too is life circumstances can lead to people wanting control in a way that potentially can lead to things that are unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I'll just put it out there. It's like the fear of uncertainty,
Mm,
that goes along with anxiety, that makes me potentially a control freak. I will
hmm
admit to that. Yeah,
hmm
but again, it makes sense that if, with anxiety, you're always worried about what if, what if, what if. So if we can eliminate some of those what ifs by controlling the situation, which I think we're saying ultimately you can't really control any situation, but that
Yeah.
gives us this kind of illusion of, you know, um eliminating some of those fears and risks and uncertainty. But okay, so what I think becomes a big problem too is when we think we can control other people,
Oh,
right? And other
girl.
people's
hmm
behavior, other people's
hmm
emotional reactions to
hmm
our behavior, just to our situation. Um, and that's one of those that should be a no-brainer. Like, of course, you cannot control another person's reaction, right? But we want to so bad. I feel like that's part of people pleasing, right? That we want people to be happy all of the time. But no matter what I do, I can't make people happy all of the time. I don't have that ability, to control that. So I think that's a big one that we might not realize we think we can control other people, but if you
hmm
break down the root of why you're so upset in this circumstance or, having this issue in your relationship, it could boil down to that.
Yeah, yeah. I think in a healthy relationship, you would care about the other person. So that person has a little bit of control over how you act in the sense that because I care about you, I
Hmm.
am going to do things that are nice and healthy. Yay, 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 yay. That's a healthy situation. I think for unhealthy relationships, truly, you have no control over that person at all. And even in the healthy one, you still don't control them. That person still has the agency to decide how they want to go about things. But because they care about you, they're going to be nice. In the
Yeah.
unhealthy relationships, since there is no consideration at all for that other person, then that is a reminder that truly you cannot control that person's reactions and how they respond and all of that. And so for my fellow people pleasers, I think I call myself a recovering people pleaser, and I still think that's accurate. So if you're a recovering people pleaser, if you're still in the people pleasing, if you're someone that has a history of trauma, it's hard. It is a hard road to say, actually, I am not the cause of this person's reactions. Even if they say things to make me feel that way, like a lot of times people will be like, well, if you didn't do blah, 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 then I wouldn't have to blah, blah, blah. That person still has control over their emotions, but
Hmm.
they are blaming you for it so that they don't actually have to take the onus and the responsibility and the accountability
Right.
to, deal with it. So it's a hard pill to swallow. And what you can always remind yourself, and I say you, and I really am talking about me as well, is that when I'm encountering somebody who's treating me in a way that is just like not right, not good, it's unhealthy, it's dysfunctional, it's hurtful, is I remind myself what it is they need. And I'm usually not that person. Usually they need Jesus and a therapist. You are not Jesus. And even if you are a therapist, you are not their therapist. And you should not
Right.
be their therapist because that's a
Right.
conflict of interest. And so I just remind myself of those two things. And I'm like, cool, what I can do is I can pray for them and I can have boundaries. Like with we had 2 episodes with Tara about boundaries, and she talked about all different types of boundaries that you can have and the ways you can set it and even communicate those boundaries. So in
Right.
situations that we can truly not control, especially when it comes to another human being, what it was sorry, I just burped. What you can control is your boundaries and how that person impacts you and makes you feel.
Yeah.
Sorry, I burped again.
Yeah. Yeah. You're okay. Yeah. So, that's interesting the way you said it. In a healthy relationship, if there's influence, on each other's behavior and emotional state because of love and consideration, right? So I think that a good word there is influence. Like I can influence the way my partner feels when I treat him nicely, right?
Hmm.
Or, you know, whatever. But versus in an unhealthy relationship, yeah, we want to be able to control the other person, but we can't. And since they don't have any, consideration for our feelings, it's just like a toxic all over the place. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. 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 I knew there was something else I wanted to talk about. Okay. A couple of things. So, what is the opposite of control?
What is it?
The word, this is well, in my head, I don't know if there's a correct answer, but I would say surrender, right? So if
Uh,
like control, you're like holding
uh-huh.
on tight to every situation, to everything and
Surrender.
and trying to,
Yeah.
you know, um, direct everything. But the opposite of that is to like let go and just
Mm,
surrender. Of course, we believe as Christians, we're going to surrender to God. He's the one who is all powerful, all knowing, loving, has my best interest in mind, and I want to surrender, to him. Super difficult to do, of course, but I think that for me, that's helpful to keep in mind. Um, that's the contrast, like that's the goal. If I'm all the way over here and like desire for control, I want to get closer to this ability to surrender, to trust, right? To trust
mm,
him completely, that I can surrender to him. And what I realized, thinking about this is like it's easy for me anyway. I don't know how everyone feels. It's easy to trust God with like the big picture, like that he wants my salvation, right? That if I trust him, that he will save me from my sin. I will be with him for eternity. That's
mm.
like easy for me to believe, because he's God and he can do that. And Jesus did what he did. And I'm okay with that. But what's hard, I think, to trust him with is the little stuff. You know what I
Mm,
mean? The route to get to that end goal that I believe that he has for me.
yeah.
So the trusting that, is it going to be too difficult for me to handle, the
Mm,
twists and turns of my life story. So things like that. So big picture, I can trust him, no problem at all. But how I'm gonna get there and what he has planned for me along the way, um, it's not even that I don't trust him. I'm just like scared about what he has in store. Like, of course I trust
yeah.
him. He's God. Like obviously, I trust that he knows what's best, but how difficult is that best going to be for me, you know?
Yeah, that's real. I'll say this quickly because I know we're winding down. That is probably one of the biggest things we need to remind ourselves as Christians. It is so important that it's my tattoo. Let go, let God, right? By letting go of my anxieties, I'm letting God deal with everything. Um, and I also think you're really talking about what it means to trust God, because even in the like trusting God when I know the plans that he has for me, the big ones, yes, I trust him with that. But with the route and the hardships, the question is, do you trust God to show up in the hardships? And in those moments with you,
Mhm.
right? Like the root of anxiety, or not the root, the solution, I don't like that, but that's all I can think of right now, to a lot of anxiety is if you were to trust yourself and also trust God. If you trust yourself to manage that difficult situation, your anxiety will decrease. And then let's say you don't trust yourself, or let's say you do trust yourself, but you are a Christian, and then it's trusting God to give you what you need to be able to manage
Yeah.
that difficult situation. So
Yeah.
we'll land the plane there
Yeah.
because I think we can be on this flight for a little while longer, but we would love to know what you think about control. Has this episode made you feel like you are not alone in your control issues? Welcome to the club. Miriam and I are president and vice president. But we are so happy that you are here, and we would love to know your thoughts about control and how these things have showed up in your life and your prayer life and your life with Christ. You can let us know in so many different ways. You can email us at connectedwellnesspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know on Instagram. We're at Connected Wellness Podcast. Marianne is on Instagram at Wabasaba. I'm on Instagram at Real with Rachel Ann. You can also find us on Facebook at Connected Wellness Podcast. All of the links will be down below. And we are so excited and so happy that you are here. And I'll hand it over to Marianne for our goodbye of the episode.
Thank you so much for tuning in, for sticking with us through all of the challenges. And until next time, be well.
Yep. Be well, everybody. Bye.
Bye.